Welcome to Now in Zen, the podcast about microtonal and Zen harmonic music. I am here with Sevish and benyamind, two men who need no introduction.
How you doing, man?
Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello.
All right. So I think this is just a classic casual chat, little catch-up.
Yes.
Just about all things microtonal. I don't know about you guys, but lately I have been obsessed with 26 tone equal temperament, and maybe 15 as well. One reason I really like 26 is because, you know how in 19 tone equal temperament, if you have C sharp and D flat, they're slightly different notes and there's a little distance between them.
Yeah.
Well, in 26 tone equal temperament, that's so exaggerated that you get really weird sort of chains and constructs and things if you keep it going. So this is a very simplified way of describing it, but from a diatonic perspective, it feels like 19 but more is what I want to call it. Like, all the flatnesses are exaggerated, and going from a C sharp to a D flat is like its own kind of semitone, which is really wild, so you can do all kinds of crazy things with that sort of stuff.
It's funny that you're talking about 26, because that recently is a tuning that sparked my interest as well, and I think I talked to you about it as well, Sevish, right?
Yeah.
Like for a bit.
Chatting about that recently, yeah.
Yeah. I think I kind of underestimated it, because on paper, its fourth and fifth are just a bit out, but I've discovered that even though that's the case, for some reason, it's kind of like that's forgiven because of some other stuff that's happening, like the 6/5, and then the harmonic seventh and its relation to the sub minor. So that's all kind of like locked in, you know what I mean? So I've, just like you've been enjoying 26 a lot, man. What we were talking about, I think, was the fact that it's kind of like a mirrored version of like 22.
Yeah.
In a way,
So, I was chatting with Paul Erlich about this maybe like last year or something, but he reckons, and this is like temperament theory stuff that goes over my head a bit, but 22 and 26 both have this property called they're consistent. I think it's consistent up to some prime limit. With 22, that's what, 11 limit, and is 26, is that does that go to 13? Something like that.
Yeah.
The reason why this came up is because I recognized that when I'm doing progressions in 22 and in 26, things kind of work themselves out. And when I was thinking in terms of intervals and chords, and then in progressions, and then things kind of go in a direction that kind of work in both of those in a way that didn't for 24. It's like 24 is right in between 22 and 26, but it doesn't have that nice intuitive kind of property that you can just jump in and start putting things together and they kind of work themselves out.
Yeah, I think it is, man. Like, in general, that's an interesting, a thing in general, that some tunings just have that intuitive structure to it. Like, it's not something you can really pinpoint, but it just works out. You know what I mean?
17
and
is
I have
a good example.
17, 26. But then for me, I don't have as much experience in the tuning, but 19 doesn't quite have that. You know what I mean? I feel a little bit stuck in its diatonic ways, but then I can't really maneuver quite fluently in the other stuff that's happening. But 26 is just very bendable in a sense. You know what I mean?
That's a really great point. I feel like 19 is so often touted as a beginner tuning, but I think it's actually a bit hard to use, just because lots of times if you're trying to do diatonic stuff and then you try and throw some Zen harmonic intervals in, there's like a big contrast between those Zen harmonic intervals and the diatonic intervals you have. And so it's not only hard to do artfully, but also the MOS scales that you get in 19 don't really bring out normal triads in the scale, like Porcupine might in 22, or something like that. So, as for the question of how a scale or how tuning works itself out, I really like your observation, Sean, about 22 and 26. And I feel like I have a notational bias that will cause me to easily be able to deal with 26, but I feel like 22, I'm still not as familiar with how I could make certain notes and harmonic and things like that. So it's more of a mental effort for me to use 22. And then 26, feels like 19 but more. And so that's my like whole vibe with it. And I'm really enjoying things like, you know, an augmented fourth also just being an 11/8 and like having a 13/8 in there being a minor sixth. It's amazing. You can have a chord with a it's perfect fifth, an augmented fourth, and a minor sixth in 26, and it's completely legit and doesn't sound like a chromatic cluster, and it just sounds like a harmonic series chord. Like, that's an amazing trade-off to have for just fifths that are a bit flat, in my opinion, depending on what you want to do with it. I also find 24 extremely intuitive, but to a fault, because it's like, it's too familiar, and I want to kind of like break out of it.
How do you find it like intuitive? You know, because to me it just feels like a broken tuning. Like you have like two times 12, obviously, you know what I mean. But I just can't seem to, you know, make that a coherent kind of picture. The quarter notes and then just the regular, you know, semitone stuff. You know what I mean? Like it's just, it feels broken in a way, you know.
Yeah, I guess I view that as like too logical. My ears don't find that surprising. Having a tuning and then multiplying it by 2 so you have the cracks in that tuning feels very much like you get the character of X and not X. Unless X is a very huge tuning and you don't know its individual character right away. So you could do this with other tunings that aren't 12 as well, and I think that approach is actually a really fruitful way to generate some interesting within the cracks movement. Like treating 22 tone equal temperament as 11 times 2, like you just stick with 11, and then when you want to shift and add some other stuff, you know, you put something in the crack. And so with 24, it's like, I kind of know it, I kind of know everything that's going to happen, since it's just 12 times 2, it's in between the cracks, but I don't think 36 is that way. However, I wrote in 36 a long time in the past still, like when I was in college, and there was this flute piece that I had performed, and there were people who didn't think it was microtonal when it got played. And I thought it sounded pretty microtonal, but I'm sure there were some melodic maneuvers that I was doing that weren't making it really obvious. I think it was also due to the fact that I was not purposely shifting between scales that were supposed to be the same, but providing alternate intonations of scales that were consistent. So sometimes if you do that, and you don't have certain comparisons, the audience will simply internalize that new scale and maybe not even realize it's microtonal. I also experienced this on 12 Camp. We were singing in, I want to say the square scale, although I think that's wrong. It was like a 31 tone scale where you would use the 2 31sts of an octave instead of the 3 31sts of an octave. It's like a diatonic half step. Well, you were using 2 instead of 3, so like the half step was slightly smaller. And you'd think it would sound a lot different, and it could, depending on the writing. See, it's all in how you write it, and not just what the scale is. Like, so much depends on what you do with the music and what intervals you make equal other ones. And so the way some of the composers were writing it there, it just sounded like, not like they were singing flat, but like it had just a mellower vibe to it, and they weren't comparing notes that should have had the diatonic intonation with the slightly flatted or sharped ones from the square scale. So there's lots of people that didn't think it was an harmonic, you know, because you just hear it by itself. And so it can be hard to make those comparisons without other information. And that's why I think harmony also is a really helpful tool, because then it can allow you to make a comparison and say, oh, that's not a fifth, so this isn't adding up correctly.
So you're working a lot on like choral stuff right now, or?
Yeah, I'm working on creating really intense microtonal a cappella music. Some of it using Dorico and some of it not, where there will be lots of different tuning systems in use, and maybe songs that have 5 or 6 different tuning systems used at a time. Certain ideas that I've always wanted to execute, and certain ideas that come from places in the past. For example, one thing that I'm very excited about is like just fine-tuning all of the mechanisms by which one can cheat using the computer. And I also want to compare different methodologies within the same song, which is something that is forbidden in a lot of composing, I think. traditionally, no matter what genre you're in. So I did this in the Emoji album and did Ignoring Years of Hindsight, and I also plan to do it in this one. One thing I'd like to do is create, kind of a convoluted, difficult passage, and then there's a version of me singing it that doesn't have any correction, that's all by ear. Then there's a version of me singing it where it's by ear, but it's flattened out. And then a computerized version that's synthesized, where I'm using, I managed to synthesize my voice using an infinitone. Anyway.
That's a soprano saxophone, I think, right?
Yes!
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
I don't know if y'all know this, but I have played the alto for a couple of years when I was a kid. Yeah.
Nice.
Ooh, do you still have it?
Yeah. No, I sold it at some point because I needed some money. But yeah, it's one of those things. I tried playing it again, but I still got like the feel for the fingering. But because the instrument is so based on your posture and how you manipulate the airflow and that kind of stuff to get like the tuning right, I don't know. It's difficult to get into it again, man. But I still have this like ambition in the back of my mind lingering, like I might have to relearn how to play the instrument, because I think it was my first love when it comes to music, you know what I mean? I was a little kid and I was always a little bit weird with music because I never quite like understood it as a kid, but then at some point I saw like a street musician and he was playing the I think it was an alto saxophone, and suddenly I was like mesmerized by it, you know what I mean? That was my first like real click with music. But before that, like, other kids were already like listening to music and joyfully experiencing it, but I wasn't like that. I was just like, music is weird, you know what I mean? And then after the street musician was doing like insane riffs, I was like, yeah, I got it now, you know what I mean? Yeah.
I love that for you. That's great. I have a few instruments here. I try to collect them. There's lots of instruments that people don't want and they'll just like give them away, and then I just collect them and use them to make videos. I'm surprised that soprano sax, almost for me, seems harder than clarinet even. Like just because of how small that reed is. Like
So the clarinet, like what kind of reed does it? It has reed, right? I guess, like yeah. But it's like a thin thing, right? Or
well, the reeds can be for various thicknesses, and those would have a number. I forget what the thicknesses are like, but then I think a normal reed is something like 2 or 2.5. I tend to prefer those. Something like a 4 would be like ridiculously thick, and 1 would be like a little teeny tiny. So I'm using it like an average thickness here, and it's going pretty well. The clarinet's definitely, the reed points down in a way that your embouchure is much more affected. And so you have to be a bit more precise, I think, with mouth placement. I think alto sax and bari sax are probably the easiest. And tenor sax is pretty easy too, but I mean, I know bari sax takes a bit of air. I really like alto just because of the size and the register and all that stuff. And I also, I wish I was cool enough to do microtonal saxophone fingerings in my videos, but I think at this point it has all been cheating. So I play it and then I just melodyne it. I'm really surprised more people aren't doing that.
Oh, melodyning the notes and stuff.
Melodyning acoustic instruments, yeah, because acoustic instruments, they give beautiful sounds, and it's hard to make synthesizers be that organic. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing I want to be doing in my music a lot more that I haven't been doing enough.
Aren't there a lot of like noticeable artifacts when you like tune acoustic instruments?
It depends on the instrument. I think Melodyne does a really good job of retuning notes and not introducing artifacts unless the note is incredibly far away or you're trying to do something strange. Like, if I was in the software, it's very possible that I might, like, see a string of notes, and then, like, if the instrument did some weird maneuver, like a breathing noise, or some other weird, like, hiccup, it might be represented in the notes in such a way that I didn't quite know what it was, and can't quite make the connection between the audio and what the note is. And so then if I try to auto-tune that strange hiccup, it will, like, introduce an artifact as a result of me having to tune the rest of the notes around it. But often that kind of stuff can be worked around. It can just be a bit annoying when working with some things, depending on the instrument. But now, usually Melodyne does a really good job. I was just talking about this the other day with someone how if you melodyne instruments that are playing to certain scales, sometimes it won't sound like a human did it, because it's like, it's not because it's too perfect, but because the intonation doesn't point the way you would expect if a human were rationalizing those intervals, like a 12 enculturated listener.
Have you worked with Melodyne before, Sevish?
No, never.
So how did you do the? There's one track, what's the name of that track? But you use your own voice, I think, and you tune your voice. So how have you done that then? Was it like manually done, or the track is, what's the name of the track?
Yeah, what track was that? I mean,
oh yeah, So Thankful, man, So Thankful.
Oh yeah, that's vocoder.
Okay.
Just vocoding. Yeah, I need to do more of that at some point. I enjoy
That's a
using
good
those.
track, man. I'm telling you, man, that's one of your best ones, to me at least, you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Yeah. It's weird actually you say that, because I've been thinking of doing a little project, like a little EP in the future. And tuning wise, I want to use just 22. And I don't want it to be too long. I want it to be like 4 tracks or something, but just self-contained thing, right? But using that similar kind of instrumentation from So Thankful. So, well, what I had in mind was drum kit, electric piano, like a lead synth and a bass synth, and that's what I was going to go for, just that.
Right, so a limited like tool set, and then each track working with that tool set, right?
Yeah, and I've got one track already that's like almost done for that. So, at some point I'm going to write a few more tracks just to add on, but use all those same instruments. And then I'm not sure, but depending on how good a sound, like this room sounds terrible, but this is my music room. And depending on how good of a recording I can get, maybe I can record some bongos on there and some darbuka as well.
Ooh, yes.
What's that?
Darbuka.
Like what are you doing, man?
The drum.
Oh, it's a drum, okay.
Yeah.
Let me actually Google it, man. Oh,
that would be good. I'd love that.
Okay.
I'd love maybe to record some of those as well. I've got like shakers and tambourines and stuff. That maybe I can throw that in for some more like rhythmic interest. But yeah, I wanted to do stuff with 22 that I've not really considered doing before, because usually I just jump in. Like occasionally I'll do a subset of 22 and I'll work within that subset. But usually when I'm working in 22, I just have all of them and I'm just going by ear and I'm thinking in terms of intervals and chords and putting those together like little Legos. But one idea, right, is bowl and pierce. And you're thinking, what does that have to do with 22? But you know, in bowl and pierce, there's that 9-note scale, the Lambda scale.
Don't tell me it's in 22.
Yeah, 22 actually tempers out that comma. So you've got Lambda temperament in 22.
Oh.
So I could be playing bowl and pierce music in 22. So I'm thinking of doing that at some point.
And how does it sound? Like, is it as good as in actual bowl and pierce, or does it have?
It's not as good. It's a little bit out of tune. But I'm going to give it a go. I think that would be quite an interesting little thing. And I've never actually written anything in Lambda before, because whenever I use bowl and pierce, I'm always using like 13 ED3, and then I go outside of Lambda all the time. So, yeah,
but interestingly, now you're gonna have access to the octave, I think, or because it's a subset you don't, or like how does it work?
Well, I would like to try and keep to that subset, but I will have access to everything there. I've got my 22 tone keyboard here, so I want to try and record as many parts as I can.
You know what's kind of funny to me? I just realized this. Like these keyboards are so like surreal, and what's the word for that? Like uncanny, because of like we're used to the normal keyboards. It reminds me of what AI is right now, like portraying when it has to like figure out like how stuff is supposed to be. So it's like there's a almost like a parallel between like microtonality and what AI is kind of considering music to be, or some shit. You know what I mean?
Well,
like
I was thinking of dreams actually. Like if you look at a musical instrument in your dream, or when you look at anything in your dream and you pay attention, it's quite distorted. Have you ever looked at a clock in your dream and like it's like going back really quickly, or you're looking at words and the words are all changing and you can't tell what anything.
When I was a bit younger, I used to practice lucid dreaming. So I was kind of like looking around in my dreams and being aware of the fact, okay, I'm dreaming right now, and I was able to kind of control that state. And what you're saying is quite right. You know, I even looked at myself in the mirror a bunch of times because that's one of the most interesting things to do. You know what I mean? But it's just like, it's almost weird how that AI is generating is similar to like how you're seeing stuff in dream state. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, microtonal keyboards, they're exactly like that. It's all a dream.
Yeah.
It's all someone's dream.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to hear, Sean, what your experience is like playing that 22-tone keyboard, because I know when I reformatted mine into 22, I didn't want to use any stickies or anything, or the orientation of the keyboard to figure out, what notes were tritone away. So you actually have the symmetrical Pajara, Paul Erlich layout, and I would have like a mod moss of it. So instead of having 5 black keys and 5 black keys, I'd have a 4 black key and a 6 black key one. So I think maybe yours and then maybe one other person's might be the only ones that actually have that layout.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the benefit of this is it repeats at 11 notes, so I've also got 11 note scales as well. So that's the handy thing. And then the one back there that I've not finished yet is a 10-tone layout, but that needs a lot of work because I'm going to have like 3 white keys in a row, and you really need to grind a lot to get 3 whites next to each other. But that would give me 7 white notes and then 3 black notes, which works out because I've got this 88 key keyboard and I've got the 60, whatever it is, 61, I can't remember, at 60. And so I've had to use more black notes for my 22-tone layout. So I needed a layout that had less black notes. So that's why I've gone for the 10-tone. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to doing some 10-note scales as well. But I've kind of stopped the project because I couldn't be bothered to continue. But I've got a nice little grinder that can I plug in and I can grind the keys a lot more easily. So that's nice.
Have you been able to work on music a lot the past couple of months or so?
Yeah, I've been able to do a bit of music, and it's been more so like just like stuff in the door. But I've not done a whole lot. I've had other things going on. But yeah, I've been doing some stuff, and I'm trying to wrap up this album that I'm working on now. But like I'm still like perfecting it, and I'm actually enjoying like going back to things and like really making them better.
The degree to which you want to perfect stuff, has that grown throughout the years, or?
No, not really. Very often I'm like, it's done, because I know from experience that all of the problems that I hear in the music, other people don't pick up on that. So a lot of the time I'm like, it's done. But this album, I'm like trying to go back and not do that as much, because I want to, I don't know, I just want to make it really like a nice experience. So I've been thinking, once I figured out the sequence of different tracks, and then I realized, okay, some of the segs between tracks are really nice, and then some of them are not. So I'm like trying to go and add like a 5-second intro or a 5-second outro to certain things, just so that they blend really well and make this whole thing. Loads of stuff to do.
It's interesting that you say like people don't hear it, because that, like we as people making the music, we're trying to like figure it all out. We're very critical of everything that's happening.
For me, it's a kind of selfish thing where I don't want to make something perfect, because if it's good enough for me, I've got other ideas that I want to start working on. So that's what it's about.
I need to I don't know. I need to teach myself how to be a bit more happy with stuff that I'm doing, because I'm always in a constant state of like wanting to make it better and hearing these tiny little imperfections that are imperfect to me, but as you said, that's maybe not like part of the experience of anyone else listening to the music, so I need to find more of a way to be happy with the music I make, you know what I mean? Yeah,
your stuff is certainly like good enough just in general anyway, that I don't think you should worry about it too much. Definitely give it a try and see how you feel. Take a track and just like say no more.
I've learned to do that more, so I will definitely reach a point where I'm like, okay, I need to say it's done, and when I've done that, I can let it go, so
yeah,
that's progress, I think, you know what I mean. Like, it's progress.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's certainly a really relatable creative struggle. And one thing that is kind of nice, I think, about like producing music and then making it, as recorded fixed media to send out to everyone, and then like that's what you do. The nice thing about that is you have complete control over the presentation. And then I think the worst thing about that is it's hard to like, I don't know, I mean, I like performing, and so it's been really hard for me to figure out how to perform anything microtonal with any kind of group without feeling like I'm forcing it on anybody. But the internet is just so easy because you just like upload cool stuff and there's other people who appreciate it. So it's really can really be a challenge. Sean, I wanted to just randomly ask you what the vocoding stuff you're using on So Thankful was.
It might have been the default one that's in Ableton. Does Ableton have a default vocoder, like a built-in vocoder? It might have been that.
It seems like it would. I know Reaper has one.
If it wasn't, it could have possibly been Tau vocoder. I don't know. Oh, how's it tuned? Blackwood.
Can you program the vocoder to like hit those notes?
Oh, so you do audio routing. So you have like a carrier signal, and that's any synthesizer. So you just use one of your synthesizers that you normally tune up and use in your music, and something like bright, like a sawtooth with lots of, because what's going to happen is you route the audio from your voice into the other part of the plugin, and then that kind of chops away at the carrier. So it's kind of like it's like lots of bandpass filters basically. It's like you have 16 or 32 bandpass filters all lined up across the spectrum. And then it's listening out for your voice, and it's tracking how loud each of those bands are, and then it's changing the volume on your synthesizer.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So yeah, you can use any synth you want for that.
Yeah, I might have to learn more about vocoders and that kind of stuff. It's not a range I've really went into a lot,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's very cool. I'd highly recommend getting into it. When I was way into vocoding back in college and like performing with that more and doing more stuff with that, I really enjoyed using microtonal vocoding in like Max MSP, and I created like little just intonation progressions that I would like sing along with that would drift downwards, and it's kind of it's a cool sensation to like have some vocoding going, and then like you can speak to get the chords, but you can also sing and lock it in, and so it feels just like singing in just intonation, but sometimes even more powerful, I think, when you are doing it with a vocoder, because if you sing the note that is being vocoded, then everything snaps in really nice, and it still manages to be really human. There's lots of interesting vocal processing to be done, and I want that to be part of the choral album too. I feel like there's too many things to do with the human voice, and that's why I'm having trouble writing. So I'm trying to limit my scope in several key ways. One of them being to not have any overtone singing, which is something you'd think you'd have in a big microtonal a cappella album, but I'm not going to use it. I'm going to see what I can do without it.
There's one idea I still need to dive into as well. That's like making a choral project with a lot of like layered stacked vocals, but I want to do everything like just by ear, So I just start out with something and then I build around those voices, and I keep going like that. So no synths, nothing to reference from, just like pure ear intonation. And then I don't even know if it's going to be like a very melodic piece or whatever, but I just start with a vocal and then build around that and layer and go deeper, and then it just ends up being like a journey with your own voice, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's also for me, it's going to be a test, like how is my ear developed in terms of like microtonality? How is my pitch going to drift? Like, where am I going to go? I just want to see where it's going to end up. If I just go free, no computer, just my voice, you know what I mean?
If I am singing something without any kind of reference, another question is, have I created the reference for myself and have I heard it? And then am I singing it later? Or am I having to imagine the reference entirely single-handedly? Because then that will make a huge difference as well. I was doing that in my Brendan Burns cover on YouTube, where I like made lyrics to Electric Planes and then sang with like 50 Stevens. I was singing the parts in a very free and kind of unstructured way, and so I didn't want to write everything down or have everything regimented, because it would have been so much work. It encouraged the idea of just like, just listening to everything else around you and then using that to build the entire thing.
I definitely want to try that. Like, no grid either, no metronome, just free expression. And I was thinking you can even like go like almost riff based, so you can make like a lot of like little riffs with your voice, double them, so that they become thicker, and then maybe even have some like symmetrical movement and whatever, you know what I mean? It can be as big as you want, basically, The main thing about that is I want to try it without a reference, because I do feel like when I'm making music, you're often kind of like bound to create a certain type of sound just because of the synths you use, because of the rhythm you're using, the metronome. So I just want to do something that's a little bit like out of my usual range of making music,
Obviously, I don't sing on any of my music, but I've like tried to do some of those things. I did an album that was called Formless Shadows, and a lot of that was just improvised without a metronome. And it's a totally different way of doing things. I mean, I like the sound of music in the grid as well. Like, I listen to a lot of music that's sequenced and things like that. But they're definitely different worlds when there's nothing but yourself and layers of recording or improvisation and or just having like a rough idea in your head but not having things locked down. That you get such great results. And even if you're working in the grid, you can do a lot by recording some material that's not in the grid and then chopping it, because that lends its own like, it just adds layers to the grid stuff you've got, and it kind of makes it a bit more organic if you want that kind of thing.
I'm really eager to see what you do with that, benyamind.
It's just an idea right now, nothing concrete, but it's definitely I got too many ideas, man. Like, it's if I look at I got like a main document where I just track a lot of ideas, like which tunings I still want to use, like what kind of random ideas I have, and that document is ridiculously long. I need to like start cutting down some stuff, you know what I mean?
I almost wonder what it would be like for microtonality to be cliche, if that's... I mean, it would be kind of strange. I feel like it doesn't really make sense. Like, maybe for things to be cliche, it's like people just cluster around like 5 or 6 different core ideas that all seem extremely easy. Lately, I've been exploring more rhythms lately too. I've just gotten better at thinking of them. And so I'm highly inclined to believe that it takes quite a bit of real mental effort to try and think of basic rhythms and tunings that nobody has done. Well, it's easy to think of tunings because you just have to not do 12-tone equal temperament. But then with rhythms, you have to, I think, work a little bit harder to get at simple like mathematical constructs that are not a normal meter. But I've been really productive, I think, with like tuplets against simple grooves and like using small subdivisions for a micro rhythm. Like using those sorts of things in combination, I think they still get you like basic grooves that don't that you can't think of anywhere else or aren't commonly used. And that, I think, almost is a good litmus test for whether something is Xen rhythmic or Xen harmonic. It's like, if you just describe the basic groove, or basic repetitive idea, or basic tuning, like, have you heard it anywhere else? And if so, there might be only, like, a few places that you can hear it. So you get back to this strange place of categorizing music by its parameters instead of, say, which instruments are used. Things like that.
Yeah, and not everybody can relate to that because these are more abstract things that we're thinking of. Tuning systems, it's very abstract. So it's not immediately obvious to people when music is described by their tunings or that kind of categorization. It's not really obvious what they're going to get out of it.
I also feel like we've kind of like went on a little side route, which is the Xen harmonic thing we're doing, you know what I mean? And then we're already like a couple of steps deep into that bubble, even if you look at the terminology we use, etc. So it's not like we're creating a lot of like accessibility through that way of communicating either. You know what I mean? It's just like our little thing that we're doing, and we're going deeper into that fractal. You know what I mean? So I'm curious as to the potential that microtonality has that it hasn't quite like unlocked yet, because we're just content on doing our own thing, and just we're not, I mean, I don't feel like the community is that focused on, you know, giving it a big platform. You know what I mean?
I mean, there's always talk of that. That's the thing. Is like, even if we're not focused on it, there's like every other breath you get, you know, somebody says, why aren't more people into this stuff? Why isn't there the introductory material? And I think it's just inherently hard to really explain easily. And I think it's fair to assume that if someone wanted to learn more about microtonality, that they know just some basic music theory, I think that'll just make it easier. Although you really don't have to know that kind of stuff. I mean, really, you're almost thinking about it in a completely different way than many musicians are trained to think about it, even though the two fit together. It's like if musicians are used to thinking about letter names and relationships, and they know all of those in 12-tone equal temperament. You can do that in microtonality, but sometimes it's a bit of a stretch, and not many people really want to apply that kind of logic to lots of different tunings. So then the new thinking you just have is, okay, like, what's an interval size, you know, in sensor ratios, and how do those interval sizes add up? And I think maybe it's the idea that you would have to think of things mathematically the entire time that could put a lot of musicians off if they're like, oh, the letters and notation and that kind of stuff is out the window, and now it's all math. I think squaring that circle.
I think it kind of comes down to when there's way more Xen harmonic music out there, that increases the chances of there being a lot of pieces of music out there that are really good, you know what I mean? So you stumble upon that, and then when you learn, oh, the reason this is good or whatever is because it's Xen harmonic, you know, and you keep going, and you keep exploring the internet like that. That's how it kind of went for me, but it was like scarce, you know, because I'm just like, I was sparked by something, and I was like, oh, I need to dig deeper, and then, but not a lot of people actually, they need a bigger or lower threshold for them to do that, you know what I mean? And we haven't created quite that type of threshold yet, where people are like, why am I like encountering this, and why does it sound good to me? And then, you know, I dive in, and then it doesn't become like a mathematical thing anymore, because you know what that 7/4 does to you, you know what I mean? So it's not, it doesn't have to be mathematical. It's just like, I like that sound, you know?
Yeah.
But there needs to be more of that quality out there. And also, like the way we produce is kind of in a, we have to think of methods of how to get stuff done. So automatically we're not always going to get the same like quality of sound that that like the regular stuff gets. And by quality, I don't necessarily mean like it being better or worse. It's just it's bound to have like a different type of feel to it. You know what I mean? Because we don't have access to everything that is general, you know?
Right.
Yeah, you're definitely right about needing to experience things to like know that they're worth exploring. And there's actually still some like Xen harmonic music that I've heard where there's a particular chord that sounds so amazing, and I still don't know to this day what it is. Like one of them is there's this Randy Winchester album that I like, and it's like one of the first microtonal things that I ever enjoyed. So this is going back, you know, probably 14 or 15 years when I was listening to this. But there's this chord near the beginning of one of the tracks that just still blows my mind, and I still have no idea what it is.
You should figure it out, man.
Yeah, all I know is that track is in 21 tone equal temperament, and it's it's really cool. I'll maybe one day I'll go in and figure it out.
Yeah.
There's actually another chord that I'm really into, and it's the harmonics, like 10, 13, 15, 19.
Ooh, right? That's a good idea.
The problem I'm having with this chord is I can't find a scale that contains this chord in abundance, that's not big, just not complicated, and something that makes musical sense. For some reason, this chord kind of, and maybe someone will come up with something.
I'm sure they will.
I think Steven has a lot of potential to get something like that done, you know?
Oh, God. I don't know any temperaments off the top of my head, but I'm sure that as we speak, there are a lot of people who will listen to this and will swoop in the comments with interesting ideas. Actually, if you guys don't mind, maybe I'll plug it into the temperament finder and see what happens.
Yeah, it was 10, 13, 15, 19. So the bottom 3 notes, you've got like an ultra major third, I suppose. That's what I usually call it anyway.
Yeah.
And then on the top there, you've got something that's a bit sharper than a major seventh in terms of like the diatonic intervals. And and it sounds really nice. And I'd like a scale that has a few of those, and maybe a different chord as well for some contrast. But I'm really struggling with that one. It's really stopped me. So one thing that I did try was 29 Edo.
Yeah.
Because 29 can do that chord, and it sounds pretty nice. But it can also do like semaphore, Barbados. You know what I'm talking about. So that's the scale that's got 9 notes, and it's got like 5 whole tones.
Is this the reason why you were messing around with 29?
This is so melodically. I wanted to use that semaphore thing, but then, and that semaphore doesn't have that 19/10 interval in 29 Edo that in the tuning. But
yeah,
I could kind of bring that in, like when I need to, I could just borrow it from like outside of the scale. And I tried starting that, but well, that was my intention, but like I never followed through with that intention. Like as soon as I got 29 loaded up, I just did whatever. It's like just true notes.
That's how it goes a lot of times, man. We got an ID, we open something up, and
brain,
there we go.
And then your actual creative brain are just totally different brains. And as soon as you get...
When I plug the subgroup of that chord into the temperament finder, I get 15 and 53 and 24 as interesting choices. And then also like 34 with a patent val.
Yeah, 15 is a bit out of tune because that third becomes a fourth, because it like goes from 454 and then it goes to 480. And by that point, I'm not experiencing that as a third anymore.
Oh God, that's right. Oh, it doesn't even have anything in between. Yeah, that's enough temperament finder for now. I probably just used it wrong.
What is that, like an online app or something?
Yeah, it's a tool that Graham Breed made. I can actually maybe post it in like the Now and Zen comments or something. But yeah, it's a tool that you can use online. There's 3 pieces to it. There's a temperament search, which lets you search for regular temperaments, like based on subgroup and error. Unison vector search, and that shows you like temperaments where certain commas are tempered out. Which I really like that one, because you can actually do the math yourself in theory. And then the last one is temperament class from equal temperaments, which is like I don't know if you know this, but like similarly to how you can temper commas out in n-limit systems to reduce dimensionality or rank, you can do the opposite and increase rank by crossbreeding temperaments together, like starting with equal temperaments so that the rank will increase. And apparently those processes are, things that not cancel each other out, but they're like the opposite of each other, and it's quite complicated. So, but it does make sense if Paul Erlich explains it to you.
Yeah, I got a thick brain, man. Like, I don't know, certain mathematical stuff is way beyond my grasp, But it does sound good that you can find. Sometimes you have these things that you just want to figure out, and it sounds really helpful that you have a tool to quickly find certain symmetries that you're looking for, certain options within tunings. So that's good, man.
What's also very silly, I think, about temperament is that there's so many people that are into temperament that I almost feel like I don't have to do any temperament thinking anymore, because I almost never need it. And so like if I ever have a question like you're having, Sean, what's a good small scale for 10, 13, 15, 19? You just post that in the Discord and you've got like 10 people who know how to temper like way better than you, just suggesting awesome stuff. Like I did that the other day with a 15-tone tuning that I wanted to use, because I was thinking like if I have a band that gets together and we play microtonal music, I'd love to be able to like play music in 15-10 like on this piano, but have the piano timbre not sound ugly enough with certain fifths and thirds that it gets that sour sensation you get from microtonal piano in some instances. So I'm thinking of like a 15-tone well temperament that makes some of the thirds sound less like 5-tet and more like something like 22-tet. And I had a bunch of like helpful responses and things when I said I wanted to do that. So, I mean, I could figure it out myself. There's also, it's funny. It's like some intervallic tasks require more temperament thinking than others. Like a well temperament of 15 is something that's a bit more intensive, right? Because you want to minimize and maximize certain intervals from a specific framework. But like, if I was dealing with Sean's question, for example, and I'd like, wasn't using the temperament finder, I might just like go around in different equal temperaments on the wiki and see like which ones had a good approximation of that chord, and then like try and use scales from that, and would sort of like do that process of finding a found mathematical object myself, as opposed to typing something into a list and then trying to work from there. It almost seems harder, the second thing.
Yeah, I don't do a lot of the temperament stuff myself either. And the most I'll do is, for example, one I had the other day is I wanted to write another track in Blackwood 10. And rather than be like, oh, am I going to choose 15 or 20 EDO? I thought, let's not do that. Let's start from the fifth, knowing that that's 720 cents, and then let's fill in the major third, but make it proportionally out of tune, that the fifth is out of tune from just intonation. And so all I had to do was a bit of multiplication, division kind of level stuff to find out the value of that third, such that it's kind of like a stretched major triad.
Mm-hmm.
As if you were to stretch it down proportionally, you would get that 3/2, and then you'd get that 5/4. They would be just.
Yep.
Of course,
I think that's
they're stretched out.
You're talking about frequency ratio. So like, a major chord normally is like a 4 to 5 to 6. And so then that multiplication got stretched to the same amount for a 7/20 fifth.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's so cool.
And then I used that as basically to fill out all the rest of the notes in the scale. So I had a kind of Blackwood, and I don't know if it's optimal. I don't know exactly what properties it has. I don't know what the focus on tuning the major third in that way. I don't know what impact that has on the minor third. But anyway, to me, a Blackwood's Blackwood. So when I got that in the door and I started writing the music, it all made sense to me, and it sounded all right.
Do you by any chance know how big the major third was?
I can find it out for you if you can hold on for about 15 seconds.
I think I can make it.
Yeah, 156 point... Oh, wait, hang on. No, sorry.
I was about to say, that's a small one.
Yeah,
that's
because,
crazy.
because the way I've written it down is I've got two intervals and it repeats at the 240 cents. So you've got to add them up. Yeah, so 396.245.
Interesting.
396.245.
Yeah, because you were talking about like a 720 cent fifth, right?
Yeah. So that makes
that's like 18 cents
stretched out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that seems like it. It probably would sound a lot like Blackwood, but the triads would sound slightly better.
In general, I feel like if you have like a certain notes that are out of tune and you kind of like stretch the other stuff towards that out of tuneness, that really helps with the overall sensation of the chords and stuff, because it's a proportionate thing. Do you experience that the same way when you're working with that stretched stuff?
Yeah, I think so. And I've noticed with equal temperaments that they kind of have this built in because they're not tuned to just intonation. So unless you're looking at like equal temperaments that are like stacks of 9/8 or something, I'm talking about like EDOs, right? So and I find with some of them that the stretching all goes in a certain direction, so it all works together. But sometimes some of these EDOs, some intervals that you want are tuned sharp and some are tuned flat in such a way that they don't work out as well. So discovering these things is quite fun because they're all like laid out there, right? All the EDOs, they're all kind of existing out there in the.
Yeah, it's funny how the more you work with certain EDOs and the more you see symmetry within, the tuning itself, but also the overlap or the way they kind of how do you say that? The way they resemble stuff in other tunings as well. You start to understand, oh, that's why stuff is happening in the other EDO. You know what I mean? Because you see how stuff stretches and bends and stuff. It's pretty intriguing. So I think there will be more discovery made in terms of all the existing symmetries between all these different tunings. You know, I think that's where I think we're just scratching the surface of that. You know.
Yeah, it's really difficult to explain to people that are new to this and don't have any experience of writing music in this way, that that's a big part of what we are doing and discovering when we pick random tunings, is we're seeing like, right, there's, we're in a universe that has like a mathematical law to it, like theory of arithmetic and all whatever that stuff is, that has these consequences that things can't be perfectly in tune, but we've got an infinite number of compromises. And that when we're exploring these different compromises, that they actually have a tonal logic. And then from there, we go from that to, this can make you feel things. This can make you feel different. This chord progression it sounds different than the one in whatever culture you were born into that you might be familiar with, as well as other stuff. Really difficult to explain that that's a big part of what this whole thing is.
Yeah. Yeah, in general, the idea that ratios are the bridge towards emotional experience, that's like the craziest thing. Rationalize that,
Yeah.
But that's hard to put into words. Oh, I was wondering, have either of you guys messed with isoharmonic chords? I really want to be doing more with those.
I don't even know what that means, but yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a great idea. It's a notion where if you use harmonic series chords, or others actually, but if you start with harmonic series chords, the concept makes sense. Like if you have harmonic series chords where the distance between the frequency ratios is the same, it like locks in more or something. I don't know if it has to do with difference tones, because I don't remember how difference tones work, even though I sometimes try to find them on the 20-tone electric guitar in a fun way. Like if you have a chord like a 10, 13, 16 chord, that's isoharmonic, I believe, because like 10 to 13 is 3, and then 13 to 16 is 3.
Okay, so yeah.
There's an equal hertz difference, like in terms of the number of hertz that's equal between each interval.
And because of that, like supersymmetry, the overtones stack up in such a way that there's even more of like a consonant type of experience to it, or
apparently so. The Blackwood scale that I was talking about a minute ago, when I was saying about how it was proportional, the major third to the fifth, is actually an example of what you're talking about, Stephen, except it's not harmonic series based, but it's inharmonic, but it still has that same property where the difference between the intervals in terms of just like linear, your frequency is the numbers are equal. I haven't done that much, but it's a really promising idea, and they sound pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing, is that they still work with numbers that aren't like integers in those ratios, like a 4 to 5 to 6, isoharmonic, but 4 to 5.1 to 6.2, also isoharmonic.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah. There must be something to do with the difference tones there, surely.
Maybe, yeah.
How do you call the tunings where stuff stays simple in terms of ratio? So you have like a couple of like basic ratios, but no matter the fundamental you pick, it remains simple. Like these kind of isolated symmetry things. I know you played around with that, Sevish. Like, how do you call that?
Oh, there's a specific one you might be thinking of, is that combination product set, CPS. And there's like hexany, decany, are examples of...
Where stuff stays simple, you know what I mean? No matter where you want to build off of, it remains simple,
Yeah, I'm terrible at explaining the idea, but you pick a few harmonics usually. They don't have to be harmonics, but very often you'll pick a few like 2, 3, 5, and 7, something like that. and you multiply them against each other in different combinations, and you basically do all of the combinations of pairings. And they can get more complicated because you can have more numbers and you can do triples or quadruples, and then you get massive scales. But, if you just have like, I think it's if you just have four. Yeah, if you just have like four harmonics that you start with and you do pairings, then you would find 6 pairings. And so you've got a 6-note scale where all of the notes in the scale are related to the other ones.
Yeah. I think you played around with that on one of your like ambient albums, and it just like the sound makes sense if you hear it, because it's so like clean. I definitely want to try that stuff out too.
Yeah, you should. It's a lot of fun, and like there's a lot of exploration to be had because you can throw numbers in and it can spit the tuning out. And you can do this with Scala if you've got Scala, or you can do it with Scale Workshop as well. In Scale Workshop, it's called combination product set, and then it will ask you to put in some numbers. So just try random numbers in there, and then and see what comes out. And a lot of them sound weird, like they don't always have a predictable logic. Like you don't know when you put numbers in what's going to come out, and sometimes you get a scale that's got like a massive interval and then a few intervals clustered together, and that's not very useful for making music. But you try a few, and then you find something that sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, recently I did have like a bigger phase where I just wanted to explore tunings, and I was messing around with a lot of like just intonation stuff myself. But recently I'm just like in a comfort zone where I just know which EDOs I want to pick, and I just make music with that stuff, Like
that's
I'm
good,
not
though.
that. Yeah, I think that's good. I think
It's good
I
when
think
you
I'm
get to that
enjoying that.
stage.
Yeah.
That's good. I think the crazy thing about it too is that it's so vast, this whole thing, that if you literally picked one tuning that wasn't 12-tet, that, sufficiently saturated like the chromatic space with maybe 13 notes or more or anything, like you could spend a lifetime there.
That's
you
true.
really could in
Yeah.
just any of them. Like it'd be crazy.
Well, including 12-tet, right? You can spend a whole lifetime
Of
in
course, yeah.
I mean,
of
you
course.
can.
But how, like, that's the thing, how you have to be very good to be groundbreaking in 12, Like, you got to be pretty insane.
that. Or any other traditional tuning.
Yeah, I presume, yeah.
I think it's sometimes surprising how people how little people have heard and how much I think they've heard. Like there's some people I think that haven't heard most of the kinds of progressions you can get in 12. So they might not be convinced that all that stuff is all most of that stuff has been tried. Not that there's no new chord progressions in 12-tone equal temperament, but I think there's no, how like each tuning system kind of has its own individual character. And
That's the thing,
you
right?
get an idea of that, through various languages and syntaxes, and I feel like many of those languages and syntaxes in 12-tone equal temperament have been done. So you can't come up with a fundamentally new 12-tet syntax / language, but you can come up with a progression that like hasn't been done before that you've like never seen, and this will happen like all the time.
For me, like, to simplify, it's just like the sensation of a tuning. I'm not gonna be. I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong. You might have something to show me, but I don't think I can be like very surprised at this point in terms of what I'm gonna hear. you know?
Right.
For sure, it might be the most epic, genius composition ever. I can be surprised in that regard, but not in terms of like the way it kind of feels, And that's why for me, that was one of the big motivations to dive deeper into tuning, is because I love the feeling of like something new that still is able to evoke something primal or strong within my experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I also feel very strongly that surprise is highly relative. So it's like, what if you are doing like a trad hymn in 19-tone equal temperament, singing it a cappella, and then all of a sudden you just hit the audience with like a 30-note chord like a truck. That's going to be so much different than starting with like a language of 30-note chords that's completely spectral, because then they go in expecting spectralism. But if you if you do that other thing, it's like you've set up a false expectation that you can then shatter.
Yeah. So I feel like the structural integrity of 12 is obviously very coherent, you know. So I think there's still a lot of like power within staying within the realm of expectation, and then in a very logical way do something completely out of the box, right? It could even be like a follow-up chord that goes into an harmonic series based thing, and then you go back into regular expectation. I still think there's a lot of like ways we can explore that, you know, to keep it within like a coherent kind of spectrum, instead of like, you know, going into a full Zen harmonic thing, you know.
Yeah, and I think the music that most effectively shatters expectations is the music which causes one to reinterpret something that already exists, or it has a strong reason for existing that could mean anything. Like, it could be poetic, it could be related to something else, just as long as it is not completely unfounded. Like, it has a good reason. It might be hard to spot the reason too, so, you know, you might hear it and think that it doesn't have a reason to be that way, but there might be something that you haven't found. Sean, I wanted to check with you with something. Are combination product sets, you said you're combining primes, right, to just create it? Is that actually...
They don't have to be primes. They can be any number you like. Of course, if you do primes, then you end up with variety. But you can... for example, one of them that I do often is... I'm not going to be able to remember it now, but it's got a 3 and a 9 in there. So, and obviously 9 is 3 times 3, but you do still end up with, unique scale. You do end up with a scale with 6 notes still, even though that prime has already been represented in both of those factors.
I see. Do you octave reduce when you create those scales as well?
Not always. I've only ever heard of other people octave reducing them, so that you get a scale that repeats at the octave. But I've done a few of these where they repeat at the 5th, and I really like doing that. And there's a song on my next album that is a hexany that repeats at the 5th. And what's nice about that is the intervals are more dense, because like 6 notes per octave, there's quite wide intervals. But when you've got 6 notes for the 5th, now you've got a lot more things you can do. But the octave is not necessarily going to be in that tuning that comes out. So in that way, it's kind of similar to other scales that repeat at the 5th. But they're just unequal. I just love unequal scales well, I like unequal scales in general. I just love scales that repeat at the 5th as well, because there's something kind of like jazzy. I know it's not jazz, but something jazzy about scales that repeat at the 5th. And they have a certain sound. So
yeah, very much so. So I guess if you had a combination product set and you used just primes going up, and like you used all of them as you went, you would just get Harry Partch's tonality diamond going up and up, right?
I'm not too sure.
I think you would. I would have to check on that, but I'm pretty sure, because you said that to me and I was like, wait, how's that different than a tonality diamond? And I was like, oh, you could use subgroups. Like you could combine like 2, 3, 7, and 11 into a combination product set, and then that wouldn't be a tonality diamond because you would have skipped 5. But then you also just told me, oh, it can be anything. That really opens the floodgates, I think, because you can have, you could even do it with something crazy like 3 and 3.1 and 3.2 if you wanted. Yeah, sure. That would get pretty weird. So just any frequency ratio. That's fascinating stuff. I need to use those more. I think that'd be a good scale generating principle.
Yeah, definitely. You can use the golden ratio, anything you like with those. But yeah, I don't know if it's the same thing as the tonality diamond. There's one other step in the combination product set, which is that all of those resulting intervals that you got after multiplying the different combinations, you then divide all of those. Each of those get divided by one of the factors. And quite often it's easiest just to do the smallest factor. So if you were using 3, 5, 7, 9, for example, once you've multiplied all of those out in pairs and you've got 6 notes, you could divide each of those 6 by 3. So essentially what that does is it removes the origin, the 1/1 that's kind of implied.
Right.
And then it takes that out completely. So I don't know if that takes it away from being a tonality diamond. To be honest, I can't remember much about tonality diamonds.
Oh yeah, the tonality diamond has to have a 1/1. So the way it's constructed is almost like how you would describe, like a 2-limit tonality diamond would just be 1/1 because the octave just reduces, and a 3-limit tonality diamond adds 4/3 and 3/2. A 5-limit tonality diamond adds 5 in combination with 3 and 2. So you'd have the 5-limit thirds. So like 5/4 and 6/5 would get added, as well as 8/5 and 5/3. So that's the 5-limit tonality diamond. And then with 7, you'd add 7 in combination with 2 and 3 and 5. So it does seem like the same thing.
You get do you get combinations that have all of the primes when you do that? For example, if it's the 7 diamond, then is there an interval that has the 2, 3, and the 5 and the 7 all within its factorization?
I don't believe so. I need to remember, but yeah, I don't believe
then.
so.
Someone will comment and let us
Oh yeah,
know.
somebody will correct if I'm wrong. I also don't remember if there's odd limit in the tonality diamond either. I'm pretty sure there is. Yeah. So like yeah. Like it doesn't actually go 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. It goes 2, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, etc. Like instead. Like I'm pretty sure. Now that I think about it more. So
A prime limit is a kind of silly thing. Like we've mentioned it a few times during this call, but like prime limit doesn't mean anything. It's just a kind of objective metric that we can point at and say, look, this is the prime limit of this scale, of this interval, or whatever. I've never actually listened to something in a particular prime limit and gone, oh yeah, that has a unique identity of its own. Kind of not that kind of thing. I don't. Is it Harry Parch that came up with that, or at least mentioned it in his book?
I think Harry Parch did pioneer the term limit for describing that.
It's kind of stuck around, but I don't think it really means anything. It's just this thing.
It's kind of strange because if you do hear the sound of a prime limit, it usually means that the person is using otonal chords that are easily described, that are close to the fundamental. So that's really what you're hearing, more than whether you have an n-limit system in particular, because there's so many possibilities that you could have. It's just so general that it doesn't describe anything you could hear if you pushed it to its logical conclusion. But people are so used to using it traditionally and close to the fundamental that you can kind of describe it with relative accuracy. But like, the Emoji album, for example, I used 1,000,000 and 3-limit just intonation, but I tuned the 1,000,000 and 3-limit intervals really close to lower n-limit ones so that you couldn't hear the difference. And so it's like,
Yeah. But I mean, it's a pretty broken idea. Like at its extreme, you take the first prime limit that contains more than one prime, which is a 3-limit.
Mm-hmm.
And from that, you can get pretty much any scale you want. Like you could write a 3-limit piece of music that sounds like your 2000 whatever limit, or you can make a 3-limit scale that sounds identical to 12 set, let's say, because as soon as you can stack that 3/2, then you can just keep doing that and going round and around to an arbitrary definition that you want. So that's why like the idea of prime limit having a kind of an identity that you can experience and hear, and like a sonic identity, it's just faulty, completely faulty. But yeah, we continue to talk about it for some reason. I do,
because you can generate infinite pitches in a particular limit. I think there are ways to put parameters on that, but usually people just do that by describing scales instead of invoking some sort of new general overarching concept, as we've done with combination product sets, tonality diamond, things like that. And sometimes people just straight up name scales. There's tons of scales that people have named that are in, just in the system I
Yeah.
haven't bothered learning them because I feel like it's just harder to memorize the just
Yeah.
intonation ones. I really love the idea of Centaur, Craig Grady's just intonation scale that has like 50 different intervals in it. I thought that was a really cool concept.
Yeah, I've got a melodica that I've tuned to that.
Oh, that's so
pretty
cool.
But yeah, I don't play it much because, well, when you record a melodica, for some reason, it sounds really brittle. Like I haven't found a way of making a melodica like sound nice in a recording, so I haven't really bothered using it. But
Oh yeah, I had to EQ some of it out on a thing that I did when I did aquatic ambience in 15. I used my melodica. But maybe mine sounds different than yours. Who knows? Mine is old and stinky. Somebody gave it to me from a garage that they had, and they were like, "Hey, I found this melodica. I don't want it anymore." A lot of the instruments I have are either presents or someone doesn't want it. So it's kind of great.
and it's old and full of spit and stuff.
I don't even know if it's full of spit. It could be. I do wonder why it's stinky. It's just like garage smell. So yeah. I'm not a melodica cleaning expert. It doesn't bother me enough so far that I have to adjust.
Yeah. You were talking about naming stuff a minute ago. I've still never named a like a scale or a temperament. I don't think I have. Yeah, I've still never named one.
Something really surprised me about naming things the other day. I feel like if you wanted to, there might still be a way to stake out some territory for naming and commas and things like that. I went to the Hedgie page to see how just intonation was notated, and I was really pleasantly surprised to discover that like all of the Hedgie accidentals that have to do with harmonics, the way you notate them is you find the nearest note in the Pythagorean chain, like of perfect fifths, and you notate it as a deviation from that, which is really smart because it's systematic and easy. It used to be different, and there were like 5 limit intervals mixed in, but they changed that, which I think is great.
Sorry, what was Hedgie again?
Hedgie is Helmholtz Ellis Just's intonation, I think. It's the main accepted way to notate just intonation, I think, nowadays in contemporary circles. Although I think there's some people that still really want to fight that and want to use other systems. And sometimes the other systems have their own various advantages and disadvantages. Those commas that exist from taking a Pythagorean note and going to its nearest harmonic, like way high up, a lot of those later didn't have pages. Like, they were just commas that were there, and I was like, what? Wait, are you telling me that no one's ever thought of the 29th harmonic by just like going from a Pythagorean note and deviating from it? That seems insane. Or maybe people have thought of that, but they just haven't bothered to write a page. So you never know. But anyway, it's funny, if I think of a new idea in microtonality and try and look on the Xen Harmonic wiki at commas that come from that new idea, I'll find that some very obvious things aren't named. And I'm not sure if it's because there actually is more territory to be claimed, or if it's just way too much work to write a bunch of pages on the wiki about every comma that you could find. It's probably a combination.
Yeah, that seems the easiest way to go if you're looking to name something. I don't know, I've noticed occasionally people join the Xen scene with a real thirst for putting a name on something. They like want to discover something and mark it out as their territory. And a comma is one way to do that, where they go and look for a number that's not been described yet and say, I'm calling it this.
Yeah.
And then not write any music.
It reminds me of how in the beginning I was so driven to figure out a perfect tuning based on what's the number again? What was that irrational number? I forgot the name.
Phi?
Yeah. So I was hellbound upon making like a perfect tuning, and then in some way figuring out how to divide everything by that number and figuring out something rotational. I was just basically like grasping way beyond my reach, you know what I mean? The golden ratio, man. That's the name I was aiming for.
Yeah, I think trying to do that is it's almost like a rite of passage for microtonalists now, and it's an inspiring journey. There's lots of people who like to hate on the theory and I don't really feel like that's fair, because I feel like, music theory is just knowledge that you can take or leave. So why hate something if you don't have to use it? Like, people are coming up with numbers and stuff. You don't have to use those numbers. You can just do your thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't get it. I really don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think one underlying thing within that, like, desire to, find stuff is the fact that there's this idea that the music we're making is not perfect, right? There's not something like a perfect tuning, even though that's a pretty abstract concept, but it's just...
Her mode tuning.
No.
Well, you kind of know what I'm aiming at, right? We're working with a lot of imperfection, so yeah, we're bound to want to find something that's perfect and name it and coin it, you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
I thought of a really funny idea. You know how 311 tet is all the rage in temperament circles? I think it would be really funny if somebody found an interval in 311 that they didn't think was tuned perfectly enough, and so they used 622 just to get an in-between one.
Sevish, for you, what's like a number that is too high when it comes to EDOs? Like, when do you like say, okay, it's done? Yeah.
Yeah. So the biggest that I've used, where I had all of the pitches laid out and available, was 53. And that was quite tricky. So I wouldn't want to do much more than that, I think.
It takes away the joy of making music. Even though I'm fascinated by the idea of 53, that's also the highest I opened up in my DAW. It's, I don't know, I get overwhelmed by like figuring stuff out, and I want to make it, I want to pick the right tone, but sometimes obviously because of the small deviations, they both kind of work, but I don't want to constantly second guess my ear. So I figure like a little bit lower is more easy to grasp, and I'll always be aware of like how I'm moving and what I'm doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that it kind of gets in the way of being creative when you're trying to lay down your parts, and you're not sure if like one note is like off by 1 degree, and you almost don't notice it, and you're doing other work, and you've got something there that's out of tune. So like, what's the point of using 53 if you're not going to make use of how accurate it is?
Yeah, and often it's not even like there's no right or wrong yet, So like, why would that one be the correct one? It's so much like, it's such a big of a concept because of the large number of the EDO that you just get lost in the I don't know, the logistics of it.
I only find the need to use large tunings if I'm writing a work that's like mostly harmonic. But if I'm trying to write something that's melodic, I much prefer working with really small tunings.
I can see that, yeah.
And especially unequal ones, like not equal, but unequal tunings that are small, 5, 6, 7, 8 notes, something like that.
When I feel like I want to, go very much in like a composition direction, I tend to want to have higher numbers because of the fact that I can reach a lot of like in-tune sensations. But if I'm just making like, between quotes, regular music, I tend to go lower because that's more fun,
Yeah.
Those are really good observations. Yeah, because if you have harmony, with the right timbre, that you can finally divide up pitch more that way and notice it more easily. I experienced this when I was transcribing Here Between the Lines, this microtonal album, Radical Tenderness, great album, if you haven't heard it. I'm getting my songbook soon, by the way. Can't
nice.
wait.
Yep. I think I've heard most of it. It's very good.
There's an introduction that's in 53 and 72. And there were a few times where I definitely sat down and had a 72 tone note and was in Dorico, moving the accidental up and down between 1/72 of a degree, trying to decide which one it was closer to. A lot of times I had to use logic to try and dictate what that would be if it was a part of if it was part of something I felt was harmonic and how it would fit into that. I used that in the decision. So it's definitely exponentially trickier with, as Ivor Derrig puts it, tunings with around 45 to 55 notes per octave or more, I think.
It kind of reminds me of like certain things you encounter when you're producing music. So for example, you might be working on one sound and you want to get it just right. But at some point, you don't realize that you're losing sense of the bigger picture. So you're just tweaking and tweaking and tweaking, and then you try to fit it in the hole again, and you're like, why was I working on that, you know?
Right.
And it's the same with like micro tuning within a tuning. So you're like trying to find what's going on, but you just lose track. Like it's like the background, the important stuff is just fading, you know? So you're like in this tunnel, and it doesn't even, it by itself, it doesn't even have to make sense, you know? It doesn't matter, you know? So you always gotta realize, like, when am I going in too deep? Especially when you're like micro tuning with these small like increments, you know? It's just, that's why I sometimes prefer lower tunings, because it's just more fun. It makes more sense. It's just easier to work with, you know? Yeah. But I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that are so like fine-tuned to that stuff, they don't have the same difficulties I have. Sometimes I just need to like let stuff rest, and the next day I will hear it, but not always within the process itself. But I guess there are people out there that are just so like in tune with all the like sensations that they know what's going on regardless, you know what I mean?
The instrument, the interface you have also matters a lot. I have the Lumatone over here, by the way.
What's your experience, man? Like the ups and downs. Tell me about it.
Okay, so the Lumatone is a great instrument. I feel like it's a little bit silly that it doesn't have a built-in synth. And when I play the keys, I think the velocity sensitivity is pretty good. It's not as good as an electric piano with, say, like weighted keys, but it is good enough that I feel like I get like a breadth of expression. Like if I'm on a weighted keyboard or a piano and well, of course a piano would be like the best, but if I'm on a weighted keyboard and I'm trying to get a full range of dynamics, maybe from like pianissimo to fortissimo, I feel like I can manage that pretty reasonably well. And on a Lumatone, I feel like I maybe have about 3 or 4 or 5 dynamics at my fingertips, depending on what notes I play, as opposed to like 7 or 8 or 9 different shades. So it's not as fun, but it's good. And I mean, for music that is less velocity sensitive, it's obviously really great. It's like any new instrument where if you're trying to get to the maneuvers, you have to get used to where things are. So I do very often find myself playing along and then, imagining and singing along or thinking of something and trying to hit a note and then realizing that I've hit a note that is different than what I imagined, or like I had a wrong note that I logically thought was in a place because I was in the zone and I wasn't looking down and I'm not quite used to the instrument.
Yeah.
The other thing that's fantastic about the Lumatone is that if you play in diatonic tuning and then change the layout, a lot of that memory transfers to the new tuning. So getting used to playing in 31 and 17 and 19 and 26, these things all feel really similar to play in, provided the tuning doesn't use, like, provided the tuning isn't a mean tone in a way that's reflected on the layout. So like 22 and 37, for example, requires slightly more thinking, because if their super Pythagorean diatonic scale is on the normal row, then you have to deviate outside of that to get major and minor chords. And I think 37 is the hardest. In fact, I've considered changing my 37 layout just for that reason. There's also some layouts that have strange sorts of steps that aren't diatonic in between certain sizes. So I think the diatonic layouts are the best. Like here between the lines for the 31 tone layout uses one that's kind of like the Lumatone's 24-tet preset layout, where it's like the diatonic rows are kind of separated by another one so that you can play certain microtonal steps next to it. So I can imagine that being really good for certain types of playing. But mostly I think people create offshoots from diatonic understanding and go from there. I'm also really interested in getting more used to playing in really Xen harmonic scales. So like, for example, I have a 20-tet layout called Grumpy 7. I think that's the temperament name I remember, but basically it just has 6 large steps and 1 small step. So it's quite, and not only is it quite strange, but it also has different variant sizes of fourths and fifths. So like it takes advantage of the fact that 20 is a dual fifths system, and it's a small scale that's easy to imagine, and it's also very Xen harmonic. So I really like it for 20-tet. And in fact, the stickers on my 20-tone guitar back there, you probably can't see it. Maybe I can grab it. The stickers right here are all laid out in Grumpy 7.
Grumpy 7.
Grumpy 7.
Is that a bit like glacial temperament? Where
Yes.
it's like you've got a whole tone scale. You've got 6 whole tones, but then the whole tones are a bit smaller. So you've got enough room for one little semitone in there.
Yes.
So that's a really nice scale, if so. And I mean, the fourths and fifths are not very good, but you can still get decent thirds, right? And that can be good enough.
Sort of. Yeah. It's yeah, that's a great analogy. I don't know why it doesn't count as glacial though, which would be an interesting thing to research. Maybe I'll research it after this call instead of doing the things I'm supposed to do. But yeah, that's kind of my review on the Lumatone. It's great to play, and I love the presets, and I love how it works. There was one key that I thought wasn't giving me the right velocity sensitivity, but I think it fixed itself, so it was just a calibration thing. I have heard of interesting problems that people have with it sometimes, but I don't think those problems have plagued me, so it might depend on which batch you were buying or how early you got one, or whatever. And I know the support team is always really responsive and very ready to try and fix problems.
So do you know if they're gonna like go for a version 2 at some point, or like an evolution of the machine? Like, are you in tune with the development?
I am unsure of what future plans are, but I know I think the company likely is looking to expand and keep going, and hopefully things do keep building.
Yep.
I think an interesting idea would be to put to try and sell Lumatones to college institutions. So think about how in a music computer lab, where you mix and master, like the room is perfectly treated and all the equipment is really expensive because the school wants to pay for things like that. All you'd have to do is convince them to buy one Lumatone, and then there's access to microtonality on the computer. And the people who are using that kind of equipment also are dedicated to they're dedicated to the tasks at hand, so there wouldn't be this excuse of, oh, we can't do it because we can't figure it out. It's just as computationally difficult as doing anything else you might do.
Would you consider the Lumatone right now like the most like central microtonal instrument? Like, does this instrument have potential to be like the base of microtonality in terms of synthesizers in the future? Because it seems like that to me. I've never played with it or used it, but it seems like it's just one of those next steps in the evolution of the Xen harmonic community.
Well, I will tell you that it is a huge game changer. So I know that with my pink keyboard, I would rearrange for videos. And now I really don't feel as much of an urge to do that. Like if I want to just whip out something to play in 19, I feel like using the Lumatone instead most of the time. So it's really nice to not have to change those things over. So it has worked out really well for me. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's the premier microtonal instrument, but I will say that the piano has held a lot of like supremacy in Western music, I think, for a while, just because of its role as an instrument, similarly to the oud in more Middle Eastern culture earlier, before that happened. You have to take piano lab in college if you don't play piano as an instrument. Like, everybody has to know piano. All musicians have to know piano. All musicians don't have to know trombone. Most musicians have to sing, but, they got to know piano, basically. And so Lumatone, I think, is filling that role in the best way that some sort of mainstream instrument could. There are other projects that people are working on that I know about that are smaller scale and less expensive. And I think people are really passionate about those projects, and I want to see them succeed as well. Just because I think the price has been a barrier for some people. And I understand that we live in the world and money is stupid, so you have to make money. But I do wish the price was lower, and I'd love to get it lower because if it was something like a cheaper MIDI keyboard in the hundreds instead of the thousands, I think that would go a long way.
Yep.
Yeah. For sure. I'd also say that since it doesn't have its own built-in synthesizer, it doesn't have a particular sound, and that actually is really cool in one way and unhelpful in another. And the way in which it's cool is that, like, the Lumatone doesn't have a sound. It's completely a blank slate, which I love aesthetically. And the way in which it's unhelpful is it's like, if you have a Lumatone and you plug it in, you still have to know how to like use a synthesizer in your DAW and stuff. Imagine if Lumatone made it so easy to use microtonal tuning that the only thing you had to have was a DAW. And so then you could just plug it in, bam, microtonal tuning. You don't even have to know how to set anything up, calibrate anything, get any of the notes to match.
I can see how
that'd be the goal.
Especially for like non-producers, that could be a very helpful thing, you know? I personally wouldn't really mind that it doesn't have a built-in sound, but on the other hand, it's also fun to have it as a standalone thing, right? You just have it hooked up to a speaker, and there you go. You got like 100 dope sounds, and you can just play, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I do have to say, I really love playing it, and I'm really glad I got it. And I think it definitely fits for like a certain type of musician that tends to be focused on video. So like that's something that I've been doing. I think if I was playing it live, I would want some kind of camera to be looking at it and pointing at a projector so that people could see what I'm doing, just because it looks so cool. But you could even use it as a live instrument and not want people to connect with that visual. It can be used as a tool for performing that's so much better than, you know, standard MIDI keyboards or like other controllers that you've tried to hack with buttons that aren't velocity sensitive. So it definitely is the closest thing we have to like a real like microtonal piano that has that sufficient gradation, velocity sensitivity, all that stuff. So it's completely unique as of now, and I would say worth
like
it.
If I were to be able to work with a Lumatone, I think for me, its benefit would definitely be spectral composition. You know how I like to work with like dense chords and that kind of stuff. And a lot of times I figure them out here on my regular MIDI keyboard, you know, like I cluster my fingers and I'm like looking for this big sound. But I think when I get a Lumatone, that stuff is going to go next level, because I can just like intuitively figure out clusters in a very, in a new way. That's the thing. It's new for me. It's just going to be like, I won't think in terms of, okay, this is how it's mapped on my MIDI and I'm familiar with where I want to go. It's just going to be open. I'm not going to understand it, but I can like cluster in a very new way, you know, cluster chords.
Can I show you guys my Lumatone presets?
Yeah, sure, go on. It's funny to me how the aesthetic of a Lumatone is like, it's futuristic, but at the same time it's also like retro, you know? It's funny.
Yes, I like that too. That's good.
Do you know, it's kind of like the gaming PC of MIDI keyboards with all of these lights and things.
Yeah. Or it's this thing that could have been like a, you know, like a prop in a Star Trek setting way back, you know? Like
Yeah, except with Star Trek, when they played alien music, it was always something in 12 tone.
Yeah, too bad, man. They missed out on that.
They would get like some gamelan instruments because that looks different, and then they would just have some 80s synthesizer just playing.
Yeah. Okay, so can you guys still hear me pretty well? Can you see it now?
Yeah, that's a bit better.
It's a bit better.
So like the reason I have it this way is because another thing that's really interesting about Lumatone is if you film yourself playing Lumatone, the presets and the colors are generally so bright that if you step away from the Lumatone and try and film far away, the Lumatone will start to glow really brightly in the camera because the camera just thinks it's all one bright object. Mm-hmm. So all of my presets are very low light so that I can create a video of me standing and playing and you can still see all the keys. Yep. And that solution still is not perfect. There's still... Like, the other day I was playing something in 19, and I was finding that, like, the color of shirt I wore next to the keyboard affected how it would be perceived by the camera and lit, which is so annoying and weird. But anyway, okay, so there's 15. It's like my orange keyboard on YouTube, right? So just orange and black. Here's 17. Spider milk colors. You know, the Mercury tree. Yeah. Here's 19. It's adapted from their preset, but I made some keys more differently shaded so that I can tell what they are better. Here's 20, using Grumpy 7. So, like, there's 7 notes here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then there's 6 here and 6 green ones. So you kind of have these islands of red. Here's 22, also adapted from their preset. 26. I haven't figured out a coloring for 26 that honors any particular musician yet. So I just used the stock colors from Sjord's website or whatever. 31. 37. The colors of Andrew Heathwaite's New Beams. 41. Tonal plexus colors. Yeah. And then
43?
And then 53.
Ah, okay. You're skipping 43. All right.
Yeah. Although 43 is great. I definitely want to use it sometime. It's so great to be able to just fire it up and play in a microtonal tuning. Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of fun, man.
Yeah, it's a good time. Oh, this is interesting lighting. I'm just realizing, like, if the light is off, but I'm right in front of the window and the camera's right here, this actually doesn't look too horrible. So, maybe I should just only film at, like, 8:30 a.m.
Yeah.
What a
Good
great
call.
time to film.
Yeah, all of us here got awful lighting.
Yeah! Awful lighting party. User -1 will be thrilled. He loves this episode. I don't know if you've seen that.
Hello, user -1.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he's going to freak out. This will be great. He did a thing where he was playing 311 with, like, 4 launch pads. I thought that was so cool. That guy's, like, so young. He's going to be so ahead of everybody in, like, 10 years. 5 years. 2 years. 1 year.
And didn't Keenan Pepper like start when he was 13, posting on the Yahoo mailing list?
Keenan!
Although he's not huge in the Xen scene anymore, I remember him coming up with a lot of the early regular temperament.
Sometimes I forget how long you've been doing this, Sevish.
Oh yeah, it's been a while. I've been trying to pinpoint because my kind of the history I have of when I got into this is a bit warped and wrong, but I was definitely aware of just intonation and Xen harmonic stuff as early as 2006, even though I didn't actually start writing anything for a couple of years, and I don't know how I let that happen, but because I was definitely in like a practice exam for my music A levels, right? And they were saying, what is dissonance? And I said something like, oh yeah, if the ratio of the frequencies is not in this integer ratios and all of this stuff. And they said, no, that's a physics explanation. You just say it means clash.
Just say
Right.
minor second. Just say major second. Just say tritone.
Yeah.
I got in surprisingly late. I've been interested in music and production for a long time, but for some reason this universe was close to me. And then at some point, I think it was through certain stuff I encountered on YouTube where I was like, what the is this, you know? Like, it sounded so alien, but it triggered my I think something primal, you know what I mean? And then the whole realm opened up, you know?
It's never too late.
It's never too late.
Yeah, it really isn't. Yeah, another thing that's wild, I think, to me too, is just how quickly cycles of like going to school and going to different jobs like repeat themselves, and it's hard to do the same thing over and over. So if you just do the same thing for 5 years and you do it well, it's like you're an example. So it's and I just plan to keep doing microtonality, so I guess, you know, the earlier you can start, the better. I wish I'd started earlier.
I'm just happy, I'm just happy I discovered it because it's just fun to me. Like, I never planned
so fun.
on being in a community, and you know what I mean? It's just something I discovered and I started doing it, and, you know, it got some good reception, and then it was natural, you know? It's just fun, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Feels great to be able to write in microtonal tuning.
So
I
it's-
really like living in this time period where we can do that and we didn't have to physically build all our instruments. We have the electronics to just realize anything.
And it's also, I don't know, it's just, I'm grateful that I got to experience something that just like felt fresh, you know? Because that's how it was for me in the beginning, and I'm happy I got that, because like a lot of stuff is just, especially with the access to all the information out there, it just becomes like mundane. We're just like kind of Yeah, I don't know, like there's a veil on our consciousness the whole time. So this was just like it was a secret, you know. It felt like something special, you know. Yeah.
Yes. What a great way to describe that feeling. There's just so much noise all the time, and it's all designed to be thoughtless. But the microtonal community is like, it's almost like to start being in that community, you have to be thoughtful.
It's just like there's no sense of sense of regularity, you know, in a way. It's not like connected to the real world, you know. It's just something, a pocket, and you can do whatever you want, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, very personal journey.
Yep.
Great.
But interestingly, you can share that experience with others who are on a similar trajectory, and that is what makes it fun. It's like new, but still you can share it like it's something common, you know. Yeah.
For sure. No idea what number episode this will be at all. So
I'm hoping something symmetric.
12.
Something nice.
Yeah, that'd be good. I feel like when we get to 100, it's going to be really special.
Yeah, for sure, man. That's a lot of effort, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, man.
There's also another thing that's funny about it is like when I just get to make Now and Zen episodes whenever I want, which is what I've been doing. What happens is there's like periods of 3 to 4 months where I just don't do it for a while, and then there's this pocket of time where I just have like 3 or 4 all at once, and so that's kind of like been the pattern, and I'm fine with that. I actually think that's great.
Yeah, that's
Because
good.
doing it all the time, it's just so much editing and so much stress and.
Yeah, I don't know how aware you are of this, but you're also like building something very like historic potentially, you know? Like let's say there's a big musical evolution in the upcoming years, then this is kind of like an archive, you know?
Yeah, a snapshot of what it was like.
Yeah, I think it's been really helpful. Well, I wish you didn't have to go, because this has been fun. We never get to talk.
It's very
now we did.
yeah, it's fun to catch up again, you know, because I think the last time we did this, or the first time for that matter, it's a pretty long time ago, man.
Yeah, it's been a long time. We should make this just kind of like a regular Now and Zen podcast kind of thing. I'm unopposed to having like regulars on the show just in general, and then also trying to like branch out and find new things. Sometimes it's just a little bit tricky to balance that, because it's like there's so many people that theoretically, if you just got a new person every time, you could just keep going.
Yeah.
So from that angle, it's kind of hard to justify having regulars on, but I also think it's, you know, it's fine. It's just, it's all kind of freely given and stuff. So, you know.
Yeah, I think that might be the way to go, man. Otherwise, you're gonna be, I don't know. I think if you keep it free within your experience, it's gonna be the most productive anyway. You know.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I'm still amazed by your ability to create infinite content. You are just a machine, man. Like, how are you doing all this? It's crazy.
Covers and everything.
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's just insane, man.
I just really enjoy it, and so I disproportionately put effort into things I enjoy, and then for things I don't enjoy, I put almost no effort into it at all.
Yeah, it's
so
a
that's what I've
classic
been
case
doing.
of hyper focus and not being able to focus, I guess, you know.
Yeah. So I figure a lot of the things I don't enjoy are just things that shouldn't have to happen. So really, like, if I don't put effort into them, what's gonna happen, you know? But if I don't put effort into this, then it's like there's gonna be so much less microtonality out there, I think. So, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
we definitely have to go now.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
I'll
It was
see you
fun.
guys later.
Yeah, thanks all.
Looking forward
See
to
you later.
future encounters.
All right. Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Peace.
Bye.